Hello, Buckeye fans. Welcome to another episode of the Bucknuts Instant Reaction. I'm Patrick Murphy here with Dave Biddle from Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports. We just got done with Ryan Day's weekly press conference, which often doesn't have much news in terms of, there's always interesting things, but today he was asked about the offensive line and the injuries of Luke Montgomery and Tegra Shabola, who left the game. What was it? That last drive.
Yeah.
And he included, I think, by himself, Josh Padilla in that mix. He said two of the three of them would practice today, and then the other one they would sort of wait and see. But then at the end, he added, "We should be all right." So, what did you make of that, Dave?
Yeah. I'm curious who's the one that is the more banged up of the three. Because two of them, he basically said, as Pat said, like they're fine. They're going to practice today. But he didn't want to name who was who.
Right.
As you just said, Patrick, he said the third one, we're not sure. We'll take it, day by day. But at the end, it did seem like even the third guy, whoever the guy is questionable this week, it doesn't sound like it's long term. So that's good news because they've been very fortunate overall, knock on wood, with injuries. Very fortunate. And some of that they're making their own luck by having less plays, and they're very in tune with it being a long season and want to protect against that. But a lot of times in football, as we all know, it's luck when it comes to injuries. So, yeah, I think overall that was a interesting response by Coach Day, and I think overall encouraging because Josh Padilla left the game, was a little banged up. None of those guys look like it was like they were in bad shape. So that goes into what he's saying. But one of them's obviously dealing with something more serious than the other two. So we'll see what happens. Tell you what, they're going to a 3-week stretch where it shouldn't matter at all. Okay, whoever is the most banged up, make sure you get him ready for Michigan.
Yeah, well, and the big thing I think is you want to use this time. You want to be able to keep doing what you're doing with Julian Say and keep him protected because you certainly don't want him hurt. And B, you want to sort of build on the running game, which was a little better on Saturday. You get over 100 yards from Bo Jackson. Now, most of that came on one big run, but one big run still counts. So I would think that you'd want to have as close to your best offensive line on the field. But if it means getting guys healthy or allowing guys to get healthy, as you said, this is a good time to do it. We were talking just before we went on here. Like neither of us really even noticed because of the way, we're at the game. Steve and I are at the game. I'm headed down to the field. You're trying to get ready for the post-game podcast. And it wasn't until after the game that somebody mentioned it to me that I was like, oh, I didn't even notice that because from the field level, especially, you can't really see much.
Right. And it wasn't brought up at post-game interview.
Yeah.
Because if somebody was asking me during the post-game show, is everything okay with, I don't know if they've named all three. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't see anything. We'll talk with Pat and Steve and see if it was addressed at post-game interviews. I believe I asked you on the show, did they say anything? You're like, nope. Because I was like, just like Pat said, I had no idea that those guards I did see Padilla leave. So I did know about that one. But I did not know Tegra and Luke got banged up on that last drive. Again, though, I wouldn't fret about this. The way Ryan Day answered that question, I think the Buckeyes are going to be more than fine.
Yeah, it sounds like it'll be all right. They have built a little bit of depth there, which is good. And look, as we saw last year, now granted, different linemen, a different offensive line coach, but they overcame quite a bit of offensive line injuries.
Like, because at the time, like last year, so prior to the Oregon game last year, the first Oregon game, if you would have asked either one of us, okay, who are the two guys on the offensive line that they cannot afford to lose?
Maybe on the whole offense.
Maybe we would have said Donovan Jackson was in there, but I bet you we would have said Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin are the two guys they cannot lose. Maybe we would have said Donovan Jackson because that turns out he was the most valuable guy on the line. And they'd lose Josh Simmons. And then a couple weeks later, they lose Seth McLaughlin, and they still win the national championship. Yeah. And the offensive line played well. It wasn't like they won it. The offensive line was shaky, but they still were able to eke it out. No, the offensive line was good. And that helps this year's team because guys like Luke Montgomery that weren't playing at all of a sudden are starters on the national championship team throughout the CFP run. Carson Hinsman, another one, was missing in action until the injuries piled up. So it's really helped them going into this year as well.
Another thing that came up quite a bit today is the idea of trying to play for awards or not playing for individual awards. Ryan Day was asked a few times about sort of handling okay, you want to get guys stats. Does it matter for Julian Sayin to be a Heisman contender or win the Heisman, something that Ohio State hasn't done since Troy Smith? Other guys as well. Obviously, the number one goal is a national championship. Ryan Day said, those do matter. It does matter to have that kind of recognition, but it's not high on the list. What did you make of that? And Do you think that that is the absolute honest response from Ryan Day in terms of how everyone in this building feels about it?
No, I think he had to downplay it a little bit because you don't want to go in there and being like, yeah, we want to make sure we try and get Julian the Heisman, and then the Purdue game's close. So one of these games we think is going to be blowouts. It ends up being close. UCLA, Rutgers. What's everybody going to say? Oh, he's focused on individual awards and not winning. So you have to go into the press conference for your coach and say, no, it's all about winning the game. That's why when I ask my question, I try to preface it as much with, if you're able to get a big lead. I know you got to get there first. I know, probably had all the caveats. He still said, no, we're not worried about individual awards.
Yeah.
We were worried about winning the game. And, if we win, all those other things will take care of itself. But who brought it up at the post-game press conference? Ryan Day himself, about Julian Sand should be in the mix at least, or maybe more in the Heisman mix, because he entered the Penn State game third on the Heisman list, and now he's number one when you look at the betting odds. So he keeps shooting up. Before the Wisconsin game, he was like tied for 12th, the 12th best odds at 14-1. He's all the way down to plus 175, almost even money. It's really crazy, like how much he's improved his stock in 2 weeks. So there's no doubt Ryan Day knows that winning a Heisman Trophy is great for the program.
Yeah.
Not that he's had any trouble recruiting quarterbacks, but this wouldn't hurt. He's had a lot of guys get to New York as finalists, as he talked about, despite this is only his 7th year as head coach. Guarantee they want to get him to win the Heisman, but they can't come out to the media and say, yeah, that's definitely one of our. Now, I do believe he's telling the truth about most of that. Like, the most important thing is winning the national championship.
Yeah.
Right under that, the Big Ten championship / beat Michigan. Even though he didn't get into that specifically today. The team goals are obviously the most important, but man, Heisman, Biletnikoff, and stuff like that, those things hang forever, like Butkus awards and things like that, which they got a ton of guys up for every award. But, Arvell's up for the Butkus. You're going to have Caleb Downs up for the Thorpe. Obviously, Biletnikoff, they're going to have 2 guys up for that. So it's pretty cool what's going on here. But, yeah, I felt like there was, a lot of truth there, but he couldn't say what he really wanted to say, was my take.
Yeah, I do. I agree. I think that is important for a program of Ohio State's stature, especially coming off of a national championship last year, right? And playing the way that these guys are, that matters to have guys that are considered among the best. I mean, how often do you see them promote the draft picks that they get, the high draft picks and the number of draft picks and all of those things? So I think they do care about that. But yeah, I mean, priority number one is winning the game, as he always says, and then obviously winning the national championship. Something that wasn't brought up, but I do think is interesting and sort of on this topic, but you sort of mentioned it. These next 3 games should be not cruise control for Ohio State, but it would be major upset, even if Ohio State struggles in any of these games. How do you think the Buckeyes approach these? What do you think needs to be done before heading into, obviously, that Michigan game, the final Saturday of the regular season?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, trying to stay as healthy as possible. But, again, though, you can't go. That's one of those things where you'll just have to see where the chips fall, because you can't go into a game saying, okay, we're going to try and avoid injuries this game. But if you just look at it from a big perspective, you could pick out one thing. To me, it would be like going to the Michigan game as healthy as possible. Number 2 would be get this running game going, get confidence going with the running game. Now, are any of these defenses going to be as good as Michigan's? Of course not. But still get more confidence going in the running game. Just keep working on things that you think need to be tweaked. The offensive line's been up and down, up and down. They've been a really good pass pro line. They've been up and down run blocking. So the things that you need to tweak, because nothing needs to get, fixed on this team, in my opinion. Even the running game's not bad. It's definitely not bad. It's just they're so good and efficient at passing the ball. You look at the national stats, they might not lead the country in passing offense, but they don't throw the ball as much as some teams. They are number 1 by a mile in passing efficiency, quarterback rating. So they're an elite passing team. They're a good running team. If they can get to be a very good running team to go down along with being an elite passing team and elite defense, I mean, they're already tough to beat. They're going to be almost impossible to beat if they can get that running game going get to a very good level. And then special teams, I think they're good on the coverage units. And overall, Jaden Felix actually having a good year. I think we all have PTSD from what he did last year against Michigan. But he was good in the playoffs last year. He's been solid overall this year. 9 of 11 is a good. I know he missed the 50-yarder. He missed one other one, but 9 of 11 is a good percentage. He's over 80%, and he hasn't missed an extra point. Punter, they haven't punted very much, but hopefully they don't need to punt too much over these next 3 weeks.
It was almost a surprise when they punted on Saturday.
Yeah, just those things that maybe they're not up to snuff. Get up to snuff. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. They're in a great position. They're going to be ranked. we think they're going to be ranked number 1 tonight. Some people think Indiana could be. It's irrelevant. If they take care of business, they're going to enter the CFP with the number 1 ranking. So, yeah, they don't need to do anything big. This is like one of the best Ohio State teams I've ever seen. The schedule's not as good as we thought it would be because of teams like Texas not being as good, although Texas is now back to being 12th in the nation, which is good for Ohio State. And Penn State being the biggest one, of course. Yeah, no doubt about it. Wisconsin, I didn't think they'd be good this year, but I didn't think they'd be a complete joke like they have turned into be. So a long way to go. But just looking at this Ohio State team, I mean, they're right up there with the best Ohio State teams that I can ever recall. And it's kind of crazy coming off a national championship where you lose 14 draft picks. You come back the next year, it's like they might be better this year.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. You took me right where I was going to go next with the rankings.
Yeah.
Would it surprise you that much if Indiana, just given the resume, like you were saying, Texas hasn't been as good as people thought. So that win is still good, but maybe not. Texas hasn't stayed a top 5 team. Penn State, obviously. You do have the Illinois win, but so does Indiana. And it was at home, but it was a bigger win. So would it be surprising? And as you said, does it really even matter? If Indiana is number 1, maybe that's even a good thing for Ohio State and really for the Big Ten to have a team like Indiana ranked number 1 in the first playoff rank.
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter. I think it would be good for Ohio State just to have Ohio State because no matter what they say, they know they're playing like 3 of the worst teams in the country. Not 3, they're just worst teams in the Big Ten these next 3 weeks. 3 of the worst teams in the country. And they know that. Anything to get them ticked off would be a good idea. Urban Meyer used to always say he wants a pissed off football team. That would piss them off. But I think, and I tell you what, if Texas had lost to Vanderbilt and Texas was ranked like in the 20s or not ranked, I would have a different view on this. I think because Texas is now back to being number 12 in the country, yeah, Indiana has a very impressive win at Oregon. The fact the Iowa game was close might hurt them a little bit. I think Ohio State will be 1, Indiana will be 2. It doesn't matter. It wouldn't shock me if Indiana's 1 and Ohio State's 2 because Indiana does have the better resume up to this point. And they've just been, even when they play a lesser team, and Maryland's kind of middle of the pack, Big Ten, maybe like closer to lower than the upper tier, but still like right around that mid pack. I mean, they just destroyed Maryland. They beat not very good. They beat a solid Illinois team by 53. So you could easily make a salient argument that Indiana should be number 1, Ohio State 2. I think Ohio State will be 1, Indiana will be 2. And we could have a situation if Ohio State's able to take care of business in Ann Arbor, Indiana's able to take care of business going forward. We have a situation in Indianapolis on December 2nd or December 6th, Patrick, where you have the Buckeyes and the Hoosiers play for the Big Ten championship, the number 1 overall seed in the CFP, and which quarterback brings home the Heisman Trophy. Because it's like Julian saying 1, Mendoza 2, and they're pretty close. And there's a pretty good drop-off there then to Ty Simpson, who's having a real good year at LMU. He's 3rd, and then Marcel Reed, Texas A&M is 4th. Everybody else is a massive long shot. So it's going to be one of those 4, and I think it's going to be Julian saying.
Yeah, and for people who say it doesn't matter, 1 versus 2, I do think at the end that could matter. And obviously these 2 teams are likely to play each other or it won't be in the conversation. But like if you were Ohio State, for instance, and you get that number 1 seed, all right, you can pick to go, depending on your opponent, kind of where you want to play in that quarterfinal game, right? I think everyone kind of assumes it'll be Ohio State out at the Rose Bowl, which Buckeyes obviously have a lot of experience, a lot of fans out there. Fans will travel out there in early January. But what you don't want to do is end up a little bit lower and then be going down to like SEC country playing an SEC team or things like that. That's where it could matter. But if you win, it won't matter.
It's also interesting. I've looked at like the brackets. Like I think we're headed for a situation where if Ohio State and Indiana win out, and then if Ohio State and Indiana win out, they'll be 1 and 2 in whatever order. No, I guess whoever loses the Big Ten championship. Okay, let's say
how it goes.
So they'll be 1 and 2 going into the Big Ten if they're 12-0, right? The loser of that game, let's say they lose by 10 points or a field goal or 7 points. Does the loser of that game drop any further than 3rd? Might they even stay at 2? They probably don't drop to any further than 3rd.
Yeah, probably depends on what else happens that weekend.
Yeah.
And then what's happening in the SEC championship game, for instance. Who are those 2? If that is Ole Miss and
A&M.
Texas A&M, for instance, or Alabama, Texas, 2 teams that are also in the top 5-ish. Like maybe you drop to 4, but
I just can't imagine. Yeah, you'd have to get blown out because even Alabama, let's say Alabama, those teams all except for A&M. A&M's the only one that's undefeated in the SEC, right? Do I have that right? Yeah. So let's say you have like a team like Alabama gets to the SEC.
Well, Alabama's undefeated in SEC play.
That's true, but they have that loss to Florida State. Right. Let's say they get to the SEC championship game and lose. That 2-loss Alabama team, there's no way they'd be seated ahead of a one-loss Indiana team, one-loss Ohio State team.
Yeah.
So I think we could be headed for a situation where there's only 3 teams from the Big Ten that make the CFP, but all 3 of them get first-round buys because you'd have number 1 Ohio State or Indiana in that situation, and then probably 3 Indiana or Ohio State, whoever loses, 4 Oregon, and then if Ohio State's 1 and they take care of business against 8-9, Oregon's 4, they take care of business with the 5-12 winner. You're going to have Ohio State and Oregon playing in the semifinals, 1 versus 4.
Yeah.
No, I mean, because right now Oregon's is right there anyway. Like, if they win out at 11-1, they don't have to play in the Big Ten championship game. They're going to slide into that 4th spot, don't you think?
Potentially. I mean,
Yeah.
if, say Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship game, Indiana has the win over Oregon, right? So if they were to drop Indiana to 3, it just depends. Like what
I
happens.
just can't see us. I can't. I mean, I guess the only scenario would be is if A&M was 12-0, ranked
Yeah.
3rd or even 2nd, and then they lose a close game.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd have 2 SEC teams with buys. Like if Alabama, let's say Alabama's sitting there at 12-1. Yeah, they have a bad loss to Florida State, but it's the first game of the year. They're undefeated in the SEC. They're the SEC champs. That could be the situation where Oregon would stay at like 5. And still, if Oregon wins, if again 5-12, and then they beat the 14, they could play Ohio State. So the Buckeyes will put themselves in a great spot. But yeah, we'll have the story on Bucknuts tonight. It's going to be, I think it's at 8 o'clock. I think it goes from 8 to 8:40.
Yeah.
Yeah, the show starts at 8. I think it's like 8. It's a 40-minute show tonight. So we'll have some analysis on what it means, and it doesn't mean very much.
Yeah. I always think that the first ranking is interesting because it shows you what the committee is looking for. Now, the next few don't tend to matter too much, especially if you just keep winning. But like every year, there seems to be a buzzword or phrase that they hook onto and are like, the strength of schedule or
game control.
Yes, something like that. And so you usually get that coming out of the first rankings, both by looking at where teams are ranked and then listening to the committee chair speak afterwards. And okay, so this is what you're looking for each week. Again, won't matter if Ohio State just keeps winning, but if there is a loss in there, okay, now, where might the Buckeyes be ranked? I do think Ryan Day and lots of coaches say this, they don't care. I thought it was interesting. He said, it only matters at the end of the season. Well, actually, I guess it matters at the end of the regular season because we have to determine who we play, right? So he caught himself there a little bit, but he said they won't be focused on it. He did admit that it is on in the building.
He said he won't be watching it, though.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter at all.
Yes. I have found it interesting this year, and maybe I just haven't noticed it in other years, and maybe it's just because the Buckeyes have been won since week 2, but they've brought up rankings. The players a couple times have brought up rankings, like the Illinois game. Players knew, that's the number 17 team in the country. They brought up the top team in the country a couple times. So while it's not a huge thing on players' minds, clearly these players are at least aware of it. I think they certainly take pride in the fact that they've been number 1 pretty much all season, and they probably will be again tonight.
Yeah, other than the opener, right? Till they beat the number 1 team, and then they were number 1 coming off a national championship. They're probably like, we're not number 1, and then they have been. Yeah, and they've won. Geez, what are they on now? 12 straight wins. Yeah, 12 straight wins. The 4 CFP, and now 8 games this year. So we'll see, guys. This is crazy. This is, and the schedule just sets up perfectly with these 3 games going right into Michigan. So we'll see what happens. I'm not a big fan of UCLA being a night game, but if you're a fan out there and you're happy I'm happy for you. I'm not happy for Patrick and I that's a night game, but I'm happy for the fans that you guys get an extra night game.
Yep. I think you take the night games when you can get them as a Buckeye fan because they don't come around very often. But yes, for us, that means late night work, which, I guess give and take of this job, right? Speaking of work, we're going to get back to it. So thank you guys for tuning in. Dave, thank you. And stay tuned this week. We'll have plenty more heading into Purdue and the rest of this season. See you guys.
See you guys.